Imagine giving up multiple draft picks, players, and guys who are actually playing pretty well. And also for Rudy Gobert. That is the reality for the Minnesota Timberwolves. Now let's be real. The Timberwolves, they were recently on a 4-game winning streak. They weren't playing too bad, but it still doesn't change the reality that this team has been underwhelming. And many people predicted them this year to possibly win around maybe 40 something games. You know, be a playoff team. Many people, we were expecting them now to be a playoff team. Don't get me wrong. And I was one of those people as well that said, man, the Timberwolves, I think on paper, they can still be a really, really good team. But as we've seen them play and throughout the course of the regular season, things have just not really been that good. Right now, they currently have a 20-22 record, and I believe they're 11th right now in the Western Conference. But let's be real. These guys just, they're not, it's not the right fit. And you know, when you look at the analytics, it tells you that Rudy Gobert is technically the best player on the team. And I feel like, I don't know if that played necessarily a role in why they traded away so many players in return for him in that way, thinking that he would help them and transcend them into a higher level of a team. But of course, we know that that truly has not really worked. I mean, Tim Conley, who used to be the general manager of the Denver Nuggets, you know, he came in and he helped transform that Denver Nuggets team. He drafted Nikola Jokic, which was definitely, in a way, luck because he was a second-round pick. I don't think anybody necessarily expected him to take off and have, you know, such an amazing career. And of course, you know, they drafted many players and had to get rid of many guys because their team was so loaded and deep with talent. But when you look at what he did and how he transformed that Denver Nuggets team into a contender and a team now that, you know, is successful, you know, he goes and he comes to the Minnesota Timberwolves on a big payday, wanting to, you know, transform this team. And this trade right here is pretty much the exact opposite of what he was doing while he was on the Denver Nuggets. You know, when he was on the Nuggets, he was actually building, he was rebuilding the team for the future, thinking about the future. And the thing is, this Minnesota Timberwolves team last season alone was all about the future. I mean, they had many young, talented players on their team. They were deep. They had good, solid veterans like Patrick Beverley as well. They had a team that went 6 games with the Memphis Grizzlies in the first round of the playoffs. Instead of just building on what they already had and just growing that chemistry that they developed that season, they go out and they trade many of their role players for Rudy Gobert and their future on top of that. And this is a situation that is not going to be good. I mean, in reality, let's be real. I mean, we know why, you know, Rudy Gobert, you know, the reasons for him leaving Utah is, of course, him and Donovan Mitchell, they had beef, you know, issues, you know, and many teams obviously exposed him during the playoffs. You know, if that was the Clippers, really just getting him out the paint and just getting him in the perimeter, guarding him and just blowing past him. Many teams know how to beat Rudy Gobert, including the Houston Rockets. Many other teams as well, just they exposed his game and his abilities. Though, you know, he's won multiple Defensive Players of the Year. He's a 3-time All-Star. He has actually accomplished a lot throughout his NBA career, but once he got traded to the Minnesota Timberwolves, and looking at the fit alone, it just really simply hasn't been great. When we look at the Timberwolves in general, clearly the best player on their team is Anthony Edwards, and we know that for a fact. I mean, he's young, he's growing as a talent, and he's somebody that has a high ceiling and still growing and transcending as a player. But when you look at the overall leadership in the locker room, I mean, you hear guys, even the coach, calling out players. Anthony Edwards specifically, calling out Rudy Gobert many, many times. I mean, Karl-Anthony Towns and Anthony Edwards had beef. Many guys have problems with each other in this locker room. And I think you can't really blame Chris Finch, because what he did last season for the Timberwolves, he transformed that team. He got the best out of his players and they bought into the system that he was building for them. But I think now, with all the acquisitions and changes that has happened, it's just not really been working. And I don't think you can blame him to an extent of that he really hasn't utilized everybody. And even with Rudy Gobert, you know, we haven't really seen him play truly effectively on the offensive end or defensive end, especially on the basketball court. And we all know, of course, about D'Angelo Russell as well. and many trade reports are out there about him. And he just, when he's playing, you know, when he was at his best, he's a borderline all-star level player. I mean, he was an all-star before, for crying out loud. But there's just really no effort for him, you know. And I heard recently that he unfollowed the Timberwolves or whatever on Instagram and all that stuff. He just really hasn't been giving it his all this season. And really the fit with him and Anthony Edwards in the backcourt alone isn't really that good. They're both two ball-dominant players. I mean, D'Angelo Russell can facilitate, but he has not really been playing that good this season for them. And I think that it will be highly likely that they should trade him away. And they should trade him away for a guy who was more of a 3-and-D player, a guy who can defend, who can shoot. They don't really, or even a playmaker, just somebody who can really run the offense at a good level. And you know, Russell, he could do that, but they just need something completely different on this Timberwolves team. And if you look at their ratings, offensive rating, they're 19th in the entire NBA. Defensive rating, 15th in the entire NBA. And their net rating is 20th in the NBA. This team has been playing very, very disappointing. And, you know, I put a lot of blame really on Tim Connelly and, you know, of course, for trading for Rudy Gobert. The reality is that he gave up an entire future of many assets and draft picks and great role players and guys who had much talent for Rudy Gobert. I mean, at the end of the day, that's the reality, you know. And you can put the blame on Chris Finch as the head coach for many things, but at the same time, you know, it's not really his fault because he's only working with what he has, and it's just not a good fit. I mean, you know, you can have Karl-Anthony Towns and Anthony Edwards in the front court, but that's not really necessarily, I believe, a great pairing. It's not like how Tim Duncan was and David Robinson. They both complemented each other in their style of plays. On paper, it sounded really good having, you know, Karl-Anthony Towns, because he really wasn't like a center type of player. He was more of a power forward build. You know, he didn't have the defensive ability and setting good screens, all that stuff like how Rudy Gobert could. But he and him are just not necessarily a great fit together. And also take into account that Karl-Anthony Towns, Anthony Edwards, and D'Angelo Russell all need the ball in their hands to really dominate games. One of the guys that really play off ball really is Jaden McDaniels and Rudy Gobert. But, you know, the reason why this video has a big emphasis as well on Rudy Gobert is simply because of, if you trade somebody really for all of those assets and everything, then that's a very high expectation for you to perform at the very highest level. And there's no question about it. I mean, because of him, for crying out loud, you know, trades that could have possibly happened didn't happen because of what many teams value and emphasis on specifically for Rudy Gobert in that trade. Crazy part about all of this, though, is that they actually had pretty much the same record that they did last season during this time of the year. And look, there's still a lot of time for them to really transform things. Let's not forget, this is their all first year playing together, and you know, everybody's still learning, everybody on the team. And not only that, but Karl-Anthony Towns is also out, of course, with calf injury, and he should be back very soon for this team. And you know, we're gonna have to develop that chemistry and try to really work things out together and see what happens. But I'm not gonna be surprised if D'Angelo Russell is definitely going by the trade deadline. I think I can definitely see a move with him getting traded possibly happen, and you never know. Firing Chris Finch as the head coach may be the case, you know, especially if he's not able to utilize lineups correctly and use players to their full potential. Many things could possibly happen, but we will never know until it does. So I hope you guys enjoyed this brief video today on the Timberwolves. Don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel for more basketball content each and every single week. Have a great day. Peace.